Welcome to Hardwood Handicappers with Zach Cohen, right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
This is Zachary Cohen, VSiN.com senior editor with a Wednesday episode of Hardwood Handicappers. Today is March 11th. It is 10:30 a.m. Eastern, and we have a bunch of picks for tonight. We also want to talk a little bit about, what we saw last night with Bam Adebayo scoring 83 points, and then some of the other results from the evening. But we'll get into the picks first. We'll do some recap later. I have 3 player props for tonight, then one side that I absolutely love. So 4 picks from me for this evening. Hopefully it ends up being profitable. It starts with the Cavaliers taking on the Magic at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. This game sees the Cavaliers as 3.5-point road favorites. Total is 225.5. I have a slight lean on Cleveland in this game. Nothing crazy. I'm not going to end up playing a side here. But what I do like in this one is Dean Wade over 5.5 points at plus 105. This is a player that really does not have a high usage rate whatsoever. He's not going to get up a lot of shots. But if you look at his numbers with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden in the lineup, he's been doing a lot better than this number suggests. He's averaging 8.3 points per game in 21 minutes per game with those two guys. 5.5 just seems like a very low total, especially when you're getting plus money odds for the over. He has gone over 5.5 points in 5 of the 6 games that he has played with those two on the floor. And I should also add that Jarrett Allen will not be playing for the Cavaliers tonight. When Allen's out, that means more minutes for Wade at the power forward position next to Evan Mobley in kind of smaller lineups. And the last time he played with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden and without Jarrett Allen, he had 13 points in that game. So I know that this Magic team is pretty good defensively, actually very good against spot-up shooters, but I do think that Wade, as kind of the lowest priority on the scouting report, can sneak in, a 3, a couple of dunks. I think this is going to be a game where he finds his way to 6 or 7 points, so maybe even more than that. But I found this to be, very, very interesting at the number it currently is, especially with the odds attached to it. So Dean Wade over 5.5 points. Then, as I said, I have a lean to the Cavaliers. I still think that this Cleveland team is really, really good. I still am a little bit skeptical about Orlando without Franz Wagner. I have said it before. I think the Magic, when they do have just one of Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero on the floor, they're a little bit better. That is, the same for Wagner playing without, Banchero as it is for Banchero playing without Wagner. But I do think that in a game like this, when you're playing such a good offensive team, the one you'd probably prefer to have out there is Wagner, who's a much better defender than Banchero. So if I had to take something in this game, I would lay the really short number with Cleveland, and the Cavaliers are very healthy outside of Jarrett Allen being out. So it's not like the injury report's killing them. Actually, if anything, Magic, no Franz Wagner, like I just said, no Anthony Black too, who's been stellar this season. And then you have Jonathan Isaac listed as questionable. And if he misses this game, that's a really good defensive piece that Orlando will be without. Let's move on now to Raptors at Pelicans. 8 p.m. Eastern tip for this one. The Raptors are 1.5-point road favorites. Totals 233.5. This is another game where if I had to take something when looking at the side or the total, it would probably be the road favorite. I'd probably lay, 1.5 or take the money line with Toronto, just because I've talked about this Pelicans team a lot. Like, they might be trying, like there should be air quotes around that, but they might be trying, but they have nothing to play for. So while they're not the same as the tanking teams in the league, they're also not quite a contending team. And it is hard to go out there every single night and compete knowing that your wins mean very, very little. And I feel like that is something that this New Orleans team is going to wrestle with the rest of the season. I think that this team is talented. I don't think that James Borrego is a bad coach, but it's a weird group. And I think that the Raptors, who firmly in the playoff mix, I just feel like these are the types of games that winning teams go out and win. And I think that Toronto, coming off a bad loss last night, they will be eager to get back in the win column, and they will see this as an opportunity to do so. But again, this is another game where I have a player prop. And what I'm going to here is Jakob Poeltl over 10.5 points at minus 115. This is a player that has been banged up all season long and really hasn't performed at the highest of levels, but he's been a little bit healthier lately. Over the last 5 games, actually averaging 28.6 minutes per game. So he's been on the floor a lot. In those games, he's averaging 13.4 points per game. And this is a Pelicans team that I've enjoyed kind of targeting with opposing centers this season because New Orleans is 28th in the NBA defending at the rim, one of the worst teams in the league at actually protecting the basket. Poeltl scores 75% of his points at the rim. So this is kind of a perfect matchup for him. And also New Orleans is the worst team in the league when it comes to defending putbacks. So if Poeltl's crashing the offensive glass, he could find some easy buckets there. And if you just kind of look at Poeltl's numbers this year and kind of break it down by like some of the bad defenses he's played, he has done well when facing, teams that are in the bottom 5, bottom 6 in adjusted defensive rating. And honestly, the last time he did it was against the Wizards on February 28th when he scored 18 points. So really wouldn't be surprised if he kind of flies over this number. But I should mention that Washington defense is the same one that let Bam Adebayo score 83 points last night. So maybe not the best defense to look at. But I do think Poeltl scores 11 plus in this game. I think he scores like 14 or 15. So I went with the over here, even though it's a player that's not the greatest in the world when you're talking about offense. Doesn't necessarily have a bag, as the kids would say. But he's solid, and I think that that's all you need to be against this defense. So that is what I have there. Moving on now to a game that I think is going to have a lot of eyeballs on it, the Rockets at the Nuggets. The Nuggets are 5.5 point favorites. Total is 231.5. This is another one where I have a player prop and no side or total. I was interested in backing Houston in this game, but would have been looking for 7 or 7.5. Maybe if it gets to there at some point, I will jump in. Maybe betting live if the Nuggets go up 4-0 or something, you'll have an opportunity to get that number with Houston. But I would really like a 7.5 in this game. But it's a game that I do think is going to end up being a little bit closer than people think. I know that Houston has been disappointing this season compared to kind of what the expectations were. I think that you get Kevin Durant and add him to the 2 seed last year, you're expecting, a Western Conference contender. And that's kind of what I expected this year. But the injuries to Fred VanVleet and Steven Adams have made this team a little bit worse than that. They're probably the best tier 2 team, but it's a team that, like, while they might not have, championship aspirations anymore, although I'm sure they do, but while we might not view them as a championship team anymore, I have said this kind of all season, but like, there are very few teams in the NBA that are legitimately top 10 in the league in both adjusted offensive rating and adjusted defensive rating. I actually only count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them that are inside the top 10, not 10 or better. And Houston's one of them. So this Rockets team has been, much better than you might think, even if they have been a little bit worse. But 40-24, number 8 in the league at adjusted offensive rating, number 5 in the league at adjusted defensive rating. This is a good team. So for the Nuggets to be struggling the way that they have been and kind of laying this many points, it does sit a little bit wrong with me. But like I said, I would have wanted 3 possessions in this game. So I'm laying off of it as of right now. But I do think that Houston is good enough to take advantage of a Denver team that's kind of working Aaron Gordon back in. Hasn't looked that great. I thought that the other night, for as good as that Thunder Nuggets game was, it was kind of a bad loss for the Nuggets. I mean, OKC is very tough to beat at the Paycom Center, but when they are playing without Chet Holmgren, Jalen Williams, and Alex Caruso, you should be able to find a way to do it. They were not able to do it, and I do think that that's going to be something that like sits with me for a little bit. I've picked the Nuggets to win the NBA title. I'm not going to back off that pick until I see something like devastating and that really is like a death blow to their season. I don't really love to change my pick, but I do think that it looked a little ugly seeing them play like that. I need to see a little bit more out of Cam Johnson. Need to see them look a little bit better defensively with Aaron Gordon in the mix. Maybe all of it starts to click when Peyton Watson is back, but I do think this is a game where the Rockets are good enough to keep it close. So that's where my head's at in terms of a lead on the side or total. But the play I've already made is Reed Sheppard over 14.5 points at -104. Sheppard is averaging 23 points per game in 3 meetings with Denver this season. This Nuggets team is just 26th in the NBA guarding spot-up jumpers. Also, just below average when it comes to defending above the break threes, which account for just about 50% of the points that Reed Sheppard scores. I think that this is just a guy that is an absolute sniper from deep, going against a defense that is a little bit, unorganized and can leave shooters a little bit more often than you'd like. And also, this is not a great team in transition, which is another place that Sheppard thrives. He's fast, he's athletic, he can finish in those situations. And just overall, I think that Sheppard has proven himself to be a really good scorer for this Houston team. And like, he might not be getting the role that I think that he deserves, and the role that I think would kind of maybe give Houston a chance of reaching that other level again. But Ime Udoka's trusting him a little bit more than he did early in the season. So I think Sheppard's going to play a good amount of minutes in this game, and I think he's going to find success in this matchup as he has all season. I think 15 plus is very, very reasonable for a player with his kind of firepower in a matchup that, has a high total and could end up being, pretty high in scoring. So I think this is a good Sheppard game. If you're looking to sharpen your edge this NBA season, VSiN Pro is where to start. Get advanced analytics, player prop projections, and expert insights used by serious bettors every day. Try it out for only $9.99 for your first month and see what smart bettors are using to beat the books. Head to vsin.com/subscribe and check out all of our subscription options. I keep saying it. You're probably sick of hearing me say it, but great time to jump in and become a VSiN Pro over at vsin.com. We have so much college basketball content right now that it's insane. It's obviously the best time of year to be betting college basketball. We also have all my NBA stuff. You occasionally get more there than you're getting here. Other colleagues of mine are working on the NBA, like Steve Mackinnon does a great job with betting trends, betting insights, analytics, all of that stuff. He's a really good read if you're kind of looking to set the tone for a night's slate. You get all the information you could possibly be looking for in his column. And then MLB's here, tennis is here. We're talking some football, with free agency. We just have everything covered right now over at vsin.com. So take advantage of 30 days, at a really reasonable price, and we'll see if we can convert you, get you long term. I think you'll be hooked once you head over there. If you like betting, it's the best site in the world. It's the best network in the world. I really mean that. So make sure you check out what we have to offer, especially our VSiN network, our channel. So if you look at YouTube TV and you have the Sports Plus package, check us out, or, you get the option of, subscribing and watching all of our shows on the website, but 24/7 sports betting talk, nothing beats that. Let's move on now to Timberwolves at Clippers. This is the last game of the night that I have a play for. I'm going to be skipping completely the Knicks taking on the Jazz and the Hornets facing the Kings. I would have considered another anti-taking parlay, but really only two options tonight, and not looking to lay minus 350 for just the two. I did think about putting the two of them in with an alternate spread on another lean or something, but I ultimately decided not to go that route. Last night, tough one with the Warriors blowing a late lead and then losing in overtime to the Bulls. That was a plus 117 that we lost and definitely hurt us for the evening. So bad taste in my mouth with the anti-taking parlays, but I'll go back to it. I'll go back to it tomorrow. I think it's the type of thing that you just need to do it every night of the season, and it's going to be profitable over the long term. I really believe that. So we'll be back once we get an opportunity to do so. But the final game of the night that I have a pick for, and it's probably the game that I'm most excited for, it's the Timberwolves taking on the Clippers, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. I know that a lot of people will probably be looking a little bit more forward to that Rockets-Nuggets game, but I've been enjoying watching this Clippers team play, and I am an investor in this Timberwolves team long term. So I get another look at them. But last night's game against the Lakers was very ugly for Minnesota. That was a game where I went pretty big on the Timberwolves. I really expected Minnesota to cruise in that game. I've talked about it a lot, but I love the Lakers matchup for the Timberwolves because I think that the Lakers are miserable defensively and bring out the best in the Timberwolves offense. Not last night. I mean, Los Angeles played, I'll call them the Lakers because it'll be confusing with the Clippers play tonight, but the Lakers played very, very well defensively. The Timberwolves were insanely sloppy offensively, turning the ball over like crazy. Also, just kind of settling for really bad shots. Just a really ugly offensive performance. And I'm not letting that performance factor into what I have tonight. I actually already had this play circled because it's a spot that I think is really interesting. I think the Clippers coming off a day off yesterday, facing a team that played last night super late. That was the 11 p.m. Eastern tip on NBC Peacock. So very late game, having to come back and play another game the next day, always tough. And when it's a decent team hosting that team, it's always a spot I'm looking at. So I've had the Clippers kind of circled as a potential spot, and the Clippers have played well enough lately for me to go in on that spot. So minus 125 at the Clippers, 2-win, 1.5 units is the way I'm going to go about this. I do think this is going to be a fatigued Timberwolves team. Anthony Edwards played 31 minutes last night. Dante DiVincenzo played 32. Pretty much every other important rotation piece played between 24 and 27 minutes as well. So not crazy minutes. This isn't like the other day when it was Brunson coming off 42 minutes in playing this Clippers team, but they played last night. They played used pretty big minutes. They weren't out of there in 20 minutes, but I do think they're going to be a little bit tired. And this Clippers team is not the type of team that you want to be tired against. They just have so many really strong defensive pieces that they just get up in you and they really make you work. I think that, playing against a guy like Chris Dunn, playing against Derrick Jones Jr., playing against Kawhi Leonard, like these are difficult players to go against when you don't have all of your energy. So I think that defensively, we're going to see a really strong performance out of the Clippers. And I think offensively, like with Darius Garland now healthy and Benedict Mather giving this team some good bench minutes, like I feel like this team is pretty good offensively because Kawhi Leonard's a good, 30 a night now. And if he has help, like that just makes things a lot easier for everyone on this offense. And it has looked a little bit better. I thought Darius Garland played his best jersey in a Clippers uniform against the Knicks. I think he's going to play just as well tonight. I really think that he just looks kind of like re-energized and good within the flow of this offense. And Mathurin, like I just said, is a guy that I do think gives them a little something. And then Brook Lopez could be the X factor in this game because if he's knocking down threes and pulling Rudy Gobert away from the basket, that opens up driving lanes for the rest of the Clippers. So that's another thing that I kind of really factored in when looking at this specific matchup. But another thing I'll just note is the last 10 games, the Timberwolves have a better record than the Clippers. They're 7-3, Clippers just 6-4. But the Timberwolves net rating is minus 0.1. Clippers in that span plus 4.9. And I have said this like recently, but the Timberwolves, they've gotten their record up. It looks a lot better right now. But they've been doing it against really bad competition, and they've been winning ugly against bad teams and struggling against good teams, which is a little bit different than what we've seen kind of heading into the last 2 weeks. I think that this was always a Minnesota team that a big part of my handicap with them in the Western Conference is like they tend to rise to the occasion and play well against good teams. That has not been the case recently. It just hasn't. Like the Lakers performance last night, that's the type of game they normally get up for. They lost the Magic game. They got absolutely blown out by 27 at home against, a bad Magic team. The only really recent performance in which this team has looked impressive was a 117-108 win over Denver in Denver on March 1st. But that was a Nuggets team that was missing Aaron Gordon, not one that you could really factor in too heavily. So just been a little bit of a lull for this Timberwolves team, even with some wins being stacked up against bad teams. So think that, the Clippers are getting them at the right time. I'll also add, like, the Timberwolves are just 11-16 straight up when playing road back-to-backs under Chris Finch. So when playing the second leg of a back-to-back on the road when both games were on the road, they have been, below 500. And I think that that's going to stand even with this being a back-to-back in Los Angeles where they're not traveling, very far at all. So this is a tough spot for them. The Clippers also very profitable when playing at home after another home game ever since Ty Lue became the head coach. So this is a team that doesn't like to travel very much, does a little bit better when they get to stay home. Not surprising given Kawhi Leonard and all of his like travel demands that he had ever since joining the team. But I just think this is a good spot for the Clippers. So minus 125 is a bigger play for me tonight. And I would play this up to like minus 140. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there if that line moves by the time you're listening to this podcast. As I said, we started this at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. That was the spread. Those are the odds at DraftKings. It might move, but we will see. But let's get into some of the stuff from last night now. We only have, 4 picks for tonight on a very light slate. So do want to talk a little bit about what we saw last night because it was a crazy night in the association. I mentioned it before, but it starts. You have to mention the Bam Adebayo game. Scores 83 points against the Washington Wizards, 20 for 43 from the floor, 7 for 22 from the three-point line, and an insane 36 for 43 from the free throw line. And now moves to second on the all-time list for single game performances as a scorer. Passes Kobe Bryant's 81, the 81 against the Raptors, where, people always like to make fun of Jalen Rose and all that stuff. Like maybe that goes away now because Bam is now number 2 on the list behind Wilt Chamberlain's 100. And it's really freaking weird, man. Like, I don't know. Like I said, I write a little bit for Bill AD in the newsletter, and this was left on the cutting room floor. But like if Raven Baxter of That's So Raven fame told me that Bam Adebayo was going to score 83 points, I would not have believed her. I would have thought that she's lost her marbles. And man, like there are weeks that I would think that Adebayo did not score 83 points. Like, is just not a player that I think belongs on this list. But man, it was a really good performance. I would say, like, I'm a bit of a hater, and I tweeted this last night, but not a legitimate 83 in my mind. Like, I just think that the last quarter of that game was the Heat force feeding Bam the ball up 25 points, and the Wizards just kept fouling him. Like, he went to the line 43 times. Like, this is not the game that we saw from Kobe. Like, it was a very different performance, very ugly, very, I don't know. It wasn't ethical basketball, what we saw in the fourth quarter, but what he did up to that point, like, it was a great performance before it got wacky. So it's not something that I can completely take away from him. I said this feels more like a 70-point game that kind of turned into an 83-point game in a ugly way, but still just an absolutely crazy performance. My producer, Matt, asked me before the show if there are any betting implications for this. Probably not, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some players really try to take the scoring to another level the rest of the season, because there are going to be a lot of games where these really good teams are facing tanking opponents. And maybe, those are games that you could just look at and say, hey, we'll just win this game by like 10 and, not really try very hard. But maybe, someone like a Luka gets a game against a really bad opponent and says, all right, I'm going to try to score 80 tonight. I would not be surprised if that happens. If you remember, actually, I don't know if it was beginning of last year, beginning of the season before. I think it was the season before. But there was like a 2-week stretch where like players were going for 50 to 70 points, like pretty regularly. And that was when the NBA had to change their officiating and kind of make it a little bit harder to get to the free throw line. But things do kind of come in waves. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some like outrageous scoring performances over the next couple of weeks when teams are playing these terrible tanking defenses. So that would be my only real thought in terms of betting this. But yeah, really good performance from Bam Adebayo. Really surprising, but really also impressive and kind of a testament to the work that he's done in his career, because this is a guy that like really was not very sharp offensively early in his career. He's always been kind of the motor and heart and soul guy that was, really good connector offensively, good passer, can score when like needed, but more of like your defensive minded big man that could also, be a good second or third option on a score as a scorer on a playoff team. But he has gotten so much better just creating off the dribble, knocking down jumpers, like 7 threes last night. That was not something you were seeing out of Bam last year or the year before. Like, this has just been a crazy improvement in terms of actual skill. Clearly he's working crazy hard, and yeah, just deserves a lot of success. And like I said, maybe it shouldn't have been 83. It doesn't sit right with me seeing him above Kobe or even on this list whatsoever, but it definitely was a legit like 70 or so. So yeah, and at least the first half was like out of this world, because that's when the game was not yet out of hand, and what he did in that, was really, really crazy. I think he had 31 in the first quarter, which is nuts too. He had 31 in the first quarter. His point total for the whole night was 25.5. And I did say this in the newsletter, but I believe there was an offer from FanDuel at halftime that was like Bam to score 74 plus, like a live boost went up like 74 plus in the game at 80-1. And I did see a bunch of people on Twitter posting, or X posting, that they ended up taking that. So good for you if you ended up jumping on that. I didn't even know that it was being offered, but yeah, that's crazy hit. So 80-1. Yeah, that was a really wild night. Started with that, but then you also had the Spurs beating the Celtics 125-116, a game that I think a lot of people are going to use to kind of say that the Spurs are, a title contender, which they are, but like, it's the type of game that I really don't think that a lot of people should make too much out of, because Jalen Brown was ejected in the second quarter and Boston was winning that game at the time he was ejected. He got 2 technicals in a row very quickly, boom, boom, out. And I do think that this was, I don't know, like, we're going to talk about, I feel like they're going to talk about this today and say Spurs beat the Celtics. They've now beaten, the best team in the East maybe, and they've beaten the Thunder a couple times this year. Is this team ready to go? And like I said, I think the answer is yes, but I would not draw too much on a game where the Celtics lost their best player in the second quarter when they were winning. Like, I think that it was a great performance of Victor Wembanyama. He absolutely went crazy in the second half. Don't want to take away much from a victory, but like, yeah, you need a little asterisk on it when the best player on the opposing team's ejected with a lead in the second quarter. Like, I don't know for sure that the San Antonio Spurs were going to win that game last night. So it was a good win. Like, it's good that they didn't lose, but I don't know that I'm taking much away from the victory. But something I am taking away from really doesn't have anything to do with this year, and I've already talked about this week, but the Lakers beat down of the Timberwolves last night, it wasn't that significant for this season, but they did just move again to 10-2 now when Luka and Reeves play and LeBron is out. It was a thorough beatdown. Like, it was not a close game at all. Like, they were up big in the second half. Timberwolves made some fake runs to try to cut into it a little bit, but in the end, it was a 120-106 win. The Lakers looked awesome defensively, which I thought was surprising. But then offensively too, like, Reeves and Luka both score 31 points, both pretty efficient. And it's just kind of a glimpse into the future. Like, that's what I said last time. I'll say it again. They're not, they're not going to lose LeBron the rest of the season. LeBron's going to come back as soon as he's ready, and he's going to play big minutes in the playoffs. So the team with LeBron is the team that we need to kind of look at when we're looking at the Western Conference playoffs. And that is a team that I think is just a little bit above average, not a great basketball team. But when it's Luka and Reeves surrounded by these low usage guys that know their roles, they just look so much better. And that's only going to be amplified next season when they've had a full off season to kind of build this out and say, look, no more LeBron's $50+ million on the books. Let's use that to get some 3-and-D guys in here. Let's use our picks that we have available to trade and see if we can bring in another core piece to kind of add to this, because the Lakers, when they acquired Luka Doncic, they got a little bit better in the short term, sure. But it was really a move about bringing in a star in his prime for the post-LeBron era. And that's what we're getting right now. Like, Reeves and Luka, we're getting a small look at what this is going to look like moving forward. And I think that you're going to see Rob Pelinka aggressively pursuing, defensive-minded players and athletes to put around those two, because it's clear that these two together just absolutely potent, and just so much firepower between the two of them that I think it'll work. If you put three kind of defensive-minded players around these two, I think it'll work. I think it'll look a lot like what we saw from Luka in Dallas. I think that Reeves is good in that Kyrie role, maybe not as good defensively as Kyrie. Kyrie, not a great defender, but really competes defensively. Reeves is a bad defender. So that's the only big difference I'll see between the teams, but it's just now up to Pelinka that, like, once LeBron makes his decision and decides where he wants to do his final year, it's go time trying to put together the next version of the Lakers. But I think that at least these last, 12 games have shown you, if you're a Lakers fan, that it's a bright future without LeBron. So I think that was something that was worth mentioning from last night, is just a really good performance of the Lakers. Also, I imagine JJ Redick's excited to coach the next version of the Lakers too, because just a lot of egos for him to manage right now, and really difficult for a young head coach who I think is brilliant when it comes to X's and O's. But we've already seen at times this year, like, he's having trouble managing the personalities, and I think any coach would. There's just so many on this team. So getting one out the door would make things a little bit easier for him. But yeah, this is an interesting team right now, because I think that they are solid, but they're not great, and they're not as great as, like, the names and the brand, like the jersey does suggest. So maybe a team to fade in the postseason, but a team I'm excited about in the future, if that makes sense. But yeah, those were some of my takeaways from last night, other than, the Warriors blow the late lead against the Bulls and ruin that plus 117 parlay that almost got home, preventing, a decent night in the NBA. Ended up being a losing night, but hopefully we will bounce back. But let's recap the Wednesday best bets. But first, attention to any listeners who are new to VSiN. Signing up for our free daily newsletter is a great way to catch up. Delivered straight to your inbox every morning, VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, and strategies for the day's betting menu. Sign up for free now at vsin.com/newsletter and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That's vsin.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. As I mentioned, Bill AD, my boss, does a great job with that newsletter. If you are a gambling fan, you love sports betting, you're getting stuff that recaps, the things the night before, looks ahead to what's coming up, and really just kind of serves as like a table of contents for everything we're offering on our website. But also Bill does a really good job of just kind of roping in everything that's happening in the sports betting space and making it all available to you in one single newsletter. It's an awesome read and it's free. So really no reason not to sign up. But like I said, let's recap the Wednesday best bets tonight. I have Dean Wade over 5.5 points at plus 105 versus the Magic. I have Jakob Poeltl over 10.5 points at minus 115 versus the Pelicans. Reed Sheppard over 14.5 points at minus 104 versus the Nuggets. And then Clippers money line minus 125 to win 1.5 units versus the Timberwolves, my biggest play of the night. So it's those four for me. Hopefully we get back in the win column after last night. Would love to finish in the green again tonight. We've been doing really well over the last 10 days or so. Got to keep it up. Really, really want to make a nice push towards the end of the season, take advantage of some of these spots that we're finding. So let's see what we do. Good luck if you are tailing me, but make sure you join us for a Thursday episode of Hardwood Handicappers. And please, like, subscribe, rate, comment, whatever you can do in terms of feedback. We appreciate all of it, but only if it's positive.